Hi, I'm Valentina. I'm a small town girl who always dreamed of a simple, honest life. But the day I announced my engagement to a farmer, my sister laughed in my face at our parents' dining table. It was a Sunday. Mom had made her famous pot roast, the kind that fills the whole house with that warm, comforting smell. Dad was carving the meat, and my sister Gabriela was scrolling through her phone, showing off photos from her latest vacation in the Maldives. Her husband Ricardo had just closed some big deal at his finance firm, and she couldn't stop talking about it. I cleared my throat. So, I have some news. Mom looked up, hopeful. Dad paused mid-slice. Gabriela didn't even glance away from her screen. Mateo asked me to marry him. I said yes. The silence that followed felt like someone had sucked all the air out of the room. Then, Gabriela's laughter shattered it. Not a polite chuckle. A full, head-thrown-back laugh that made my cheeks burn. A farmer? She said, finally looking at me. Really, Val? A farmer? I felt my jaw tighten. His name is Mateo, and yes, he works the land his family has owned for generations. Gabriela set down her phone, her perfectly manicured nails tapping against the table. While my husband manages millions in finance, you're going to marry someone who shovels dirt for a living? She turned to our parents. Mom, Dad, tell her this is insane. Mom and Dad exchanged glances. That look, the one that said they agreed but didn't want to say it out loud. Dad cleared his throat. Valentina, honey, we just want you to be secure. Farming is hard work, uncertain work. Mateo's a good man, I said quietly. I'm sure he is, Mom said, her voice gentle but strained. But Gabriela has a point. You've seen how comfortable their life is. Don't you want that? Gabriela leaned back in her chair, arms crossed, a smug smile playing on her lips. I'm not trying to be mean, Val. I'm trying to help you. You're making a mistake you'll regret for the rest of your life. I stood up. My hands were shaking. I'm marrying him. Nobody said a word as I grabbed my purse and walked out. Behind me, I could hear Gabriela's voice, dripping with pity. She'll come to her senses eventually. Before we continue, if you've ever been judged for choosing love over status, hit that subscribe button. You'll want to see how this turns out. Trust me, the ending is worth it. Stick around till the end because what my husband revealed about who actually owns the land, it changed everything. 6 months later, I was Mrs. Valentina Rodriguez. The wedding was small. Mateo's family was there. A few of my friends. My parents came, but left early. Gabriela didn't show up at all. She sent a text the morning of, "Hope you're happy. Call me when reality sets in." We moved to the farm the next day. It was a 2-hour drive from the city where I'd grown up, into rolling hills and open sky. The farmhouse was over 100 years old, with creaking floorboards and windows that rattled in the wind. It wasn't a penthouse. It wasn't even close. But it was ours. Mateo showed me around that first morning, his hand warm in mine. The barn where his grandfather had raised horses. The fields where they grew corn and soybeans. The small greenhouse where his mother had grown tomatoes before she passed away. It's not fancy, he said almost apologetically. It's perfect, I told him. And I meant it, but Gabriela had other ideas. The messages started within the first week. A photo of her and Ricardo at a 5-star resort in Cabo. Caption, "Living our best life. Hope the farm is treating you well." Another photo, this time of a designer handbag. "Early birthday present from Ricardo. He spoils me." Then a screenshot of a real estate listing for a beach house. "Just bought our second property. Investment goals." I stopped responding after the third message, but she didn't stop sending them. Then came the phone calls from my parents. Always Mom, with Dad chiming in from the background. "We're worried about your future, honey," Mom said during one call. I was sitting on the porch, watching Mateo fix a fence in the distance. Gabriela's life is so stable. My life is stable too, Mom. But what if something happens? Farming is so unpredictable. Droughts, storms, market prices. We're fine. A pause. Then Dad's voice, distant but clear. "We just don't want you to struggle, sweetheart." I hung up feeling hollow. The worst part came a month later when I noticed I'd been removed from the family group chat, the one where Dad shared financial advice articles and Mom posted photos of family dinners. I opened the chat history and saw the last message. Planning for the future. Gabriela and Ricardo are teaching us about investment portfolios. I wasn't in that future, apparently. That night, I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at my phone. Mateo came in, saw my face, and sat down beside me. "They don't get it," I said. "No," he agreed. "They don't. Sometimes I wonder if I made a mistake." Mateo took my hand. His fingers were calloused from work, rough but gentle. "Their approval doesn't define our worth, Val. You know that, right?" I did know. Logically. But emotionally? That was harder. 2 months into our marriage, on my birthday, a package arrived. I thought maybe my parents had sent something, an olive branch. Instead, it was from Gabriela. Inside was a self-help book titled, "When You Marry for Love Instead of Logic." I threw it in the trash. Mateo found it later and read the title. He didn't say anything. He just wrapped his arms around me while I cried into his shirt. But slowly, things started to shift. The farm wasn't just Mateo's anymore. It was becoming mine, too. I learned how to check soil pH, when to plant seedlings, how to identify pests before they destroyed a crop. My hands got rougher, my back got stronger, and something inside me started to heal. One evening, about 4 months after we'd married, Mateo came home with dirt under his nails and a small wooden box in his hands. "What's that?" I asked. He set it on the kitchen table and opened it carefully. Inside, nestled in old fabric, was a brass compass. It was tarnished with age, but still beautiful. "This belonged to my grandfather," Mateo said. "He used it when he first surveyed this land back in the 1950s. He always said it kept him on the right path." He placed it in my hands. It was heavier than I expected. "I want you to have it," he said. "This guided my grandfather when he first surveyed this land. Now it's yours." I turned it over in my palms, feeling the weight of history in it. "Why are you giving this to me?" "Because you're part of this now, part of the legacy." He smiled. "And because I want you to always know you're on the right path, even when other people try to tell you otherwise." I kissed him then, standing in our old kitchen with dirt on the floor and the compass cool against my palm. It felt like a promise, like something bigger than just the two of us. Meanwhile, Gabriela's social media presence exploded. Every week there was something new to showcase. A photo at an exclusive restaurant, a video tour of their newly renovated penthouse with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, a selfie in front of a brand-new Mercedes, and then came the magazine feature. Mom texted me the link. "Thought you'd want to see this. So proud of Gabriela." It was a local business magazine, one of those glossy publications that profiled up-and-coming entrepreneurs and financial advisors. The headline read, "Ricardo Mendoza, the investment genius transforming portfolios." The article praised his innovative strategies and bold approach to wealth management. There was a photo of him and Gabriela at some charity gala, both of them dressed like they'd stepped out of a Hollywood movie. At the bottom, a quote from Ricardo. "Success isn't about working harder. It's about working smarter and knowing where to place your bets." I closed the link without reading the rest. That weekend, my parents invited us to dinner. "Both of you," Mom stressed on the phone. "We want to see you, Valentina. It's been too long." When we arrived, Gabriela and Ricardo were already there. The dining room table was set like something out of a magazine spread. Gabriela was wearing a dress that probably cost more than our monthly grocery budget. "Valentina," Mom said, pulling me into a hug that felt stiff. "And Mateo, so good to see you." Mateo shook Dad's hand. Ricardo gave him a once-over, the kind of look that measured and dismissed in the same second. Dinner was awkward. Gabriela dominated the conversation, talking about their upcoming trip to Paris and the investment opportunities Ricardo was exploring in emerging markets. Dad hung on every word. Mom kept glancing at me like she was waiting for me to say something impressive. I didn't. "So, Mateo," Ricardo said at one point, swirling his wine. "Still doing the farming thing?" "Still doing it," Mateo replied evenly. Must be tough, with all the uncertainty in agriculture these days. Climate change, supply chain issues, tariffs. We manage. Ricardo smiled, not a kind smile. Well, if you ever want to talk about diversifying your income, let me know. I could give you some tips. Mateo just nodded. Under the table, I squeezed his hand. After dinner, while Mom and Gabriela were in the kitchen, Dad pulled Mateo aside. I stayed in the doorway, listening. Look, son, Dad said, his voice low. I know you're working hard, but if you ever need help, financial advice, a loan to expand the operation. We're here. We want Valentina taken care of. She is taken care of, Mateo said quietly. Right, of course. Dad cleared his throat. I just mean, at least one daughter made smart choices, you know? Set herself up for the future. I left before I could hear Mateo's response. On the drive home, neither of us spoke for a long time. Finally, Mateo broke the silence. They don't see us, he said. They see what they think we are. I know. Do you regret it, marrying me? I looked at him, really looked at him, his strong hands on the wheel, the quiet determination in his eyes, the man who gave me a compass and called it a legacy. Never, I said. Not for a second. But the doubt planted by my family grew roots, even when I tried to ignore it. The farm was doing well. We were making a profit, slowly building something sustainable. But it wasn't flashy, it wasn't magazine-worthy, and some small, shameful part of me wondered if my parents were right. Then, Mateo started teaching me about the land itself, not just the crops, but the history, the water rights that came with the property, dating back generations, the mineral surveys his grandfather had commissioned in the 1960s, the legal protections that had been put in place to preserve the land's integrity. My grandfather was careful, Mateo explained one evening as we sat on the porch. He knew this land was more than just dirt and crops. He saw its value in ways other people didn't. What do you mean? Mateo smiled. I'll show you someday, when the time is right. It was a cryptic answer, but I didn't push. I was learning to trust his timing. By the end of our first year of marriage, the farm had become more than just a place I lived. It was part of me. I knew which fields drained poorly in heavy rain. I knew the best spots for planting tomatoes. I knew the sound of the tractor engine when it needed oil. And I knew, deep in my bones, that this life was worth more than anything Gabriela's money could buy. But I didn't know yet just how much it was worth, or how soon my family would try to take it from us. One afternoon, while Mateo was in town picking up supplies, I found a wooden box in the barn. It was old, the kind with a rusted latch and layers of dust that suggested it hadn't been opened in years. Curious, I carried it inside and wiped it clean. Inside were papers, legal documents with official seals and faded ink, land deeds, water rights certificates, survey maps marked with red ink and careful notes, and at the bottom, a leather-bound journal with Mateo's grandfather's name embossed on the cover. I didn't read it, not yet. It felt too private, too important to rush through, but I set it on the kitchen table where Mateo would see it when he came home. When he walked in and saw the box, he stopped in his tracks. Where did you find that? In the barn. I wasn't snooping, He held up a hand. It's okay. You were meant to find it eventually. He sat down and ran his fingers over the journal's cover. This was my grandfather's legacy. Everything he learned, everything he built, it's all in here. Will you show me? He opened the journal to a page marked with a faded ribbon. Not just show you, I'll teach you, because this legacy isn't just mine anymore, Val. It's ours. And in that moment, sitting at our old kitchen table with a compass in my pocket and a journal full of secrets in front of me, I finally understood. My sister could have her penthouse and her magazine features and her designer life. I had something worth infinitely more. I had the truth. 2 years passed, 2 years of quiet mornings and hard work and slow, steady growth. The farm thrived. We expanded the greenhouse, added solar panels, started selling organic produce at the farmer's market 3 towns over. People knew our name, trusted our product, and then, on a Tuesday morning in October, everything changed. I was pulling weeds in the tomato beds when my phone rang. Mom. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Valentina, her voice was shaking. We need to talk. It's about Gabriela. My stomach dropped. Is she okay? Did something happen? Can you come to the house? Today? Please, it's urgent. I found Mateo in the barn and told him. He wiped his hands on his jeans and nodded. Let's go. The drive felt longer than usual. Mom wouldn't tell me anything over the phone, just kept saying, we need to talk in person. By the time we pulled into my parents' driveway, my hands were clammy. Gabriela's Mercedes was already there. So was Ricardo's Audi. Through the window, I could see movement inside. Mom opened the door before we could knock. Her eyes were red. Thank you for coming. Inside, Dad was sitting on the couch, his face gray. Gabriela was pacing by the window, her arms wrapped around herself. Ricardo sat in the armchair, staring at the floor. Nobody looked at us when we walked in. What's going on? I asked. Dad cleared his throat. There's been a situation with Ricardo's firm. Ricardo finally looked up. His eyes were hollow. The SEC launched an investigation 3 weeks ago. Fraud allegations. They froze our accounts yesterday. The room spun slightly. What kind of fraud? I didn't do anything, Ricardo said quickly. It's a misunderstanding. A client misinterpreted some investment strategies, and now they're claiming I misled them. But the legal fees alone are going to bankrupt us. Gabriela's voice was small, broken. They're going to take the penthouse, the cars, everything. I looked at Mateo. His face was unreadable. Mom stepped forward, wringing her hands. That's why we asked you here. We need to talk about options, as a family. Options, I repeated slowly. Dad stood up. Valentina, honey, you have this land, all these acres. It's just sitting here, and meanwhile, your sister is losing everything. The air felt thick. What are you asking? We need you to sell it, Mom said, her voice pleading. Or at least take out a loan against it. The lawyers say we need at least $200,000 up front to even start fighting this thing. I actually laughed. A short, bitter sound. You want me to sell our farm? It's not about wanting, Gabriela snapped, suddenly finding her voice. It's about needing. We'll lose everything, Val. The lawyers, the debts, the court fees. Do you understand what I'm saying? We're talking about saving our lives here. Ricardo leaned forward. It's just dirt and crops. You can rent somewhere else. Start over. But we can't start over from prison. Prison? I whispered. If they prove fraud, yes, Ricardo said flatly. So forgive me if I think your little farm is less important than my freedom. Mateo's hand found mine. His grip was steady. You're asking us to give up everything we've built, I said quietly. I asked you to marry someone successful, Gabriela shouted. I warned you. I tried to help you, but you chose this. And now, when your family needs you, when I need you, you're going to act like it's some huge sacrifice? Mom put a hand on Gabriela's arm. Sweetie, calm down. No, Gabriela yanked her arm away. She's always been like this, stubborn, selfish, choosing her own happiness over family. That's enough, Dad said, but his voice lacked conviction. I stood up. We need to think about this. There's nothing to think about, Gabriela said. Family helps family. That's what you do. Mateo stood too. We'll be in touch. Wait, Mom called as we headed for the door. Please, just think about it. For Gabriela. For all of us. We didn't speak on the drive home. When we pulled into the driveway, I finally broke. They want us to sell everything. I know. Like it's nothing. Like 2 years of our lives, your family's legacy. It's all just disposable. Mateo turned off the engine and looked at me. Do you want to help them? I don't know. She's my sister. She's also the person who mocked you for marrying me, who made you feel small for choosing this life. I pressed my palms against my eyes. What kind of person does it make me if I say no? Human, Mateo said simply. Come on, I want to show you something. He led me to the farmhouse basement. I'd been down there maybe twice, both times just to grab canning jars from storage. But now Mateo moved aside some boxes and pulled out a large wooden crate. Remember that box you found in the barn, with my grandfather's journal? Yeah, this is the rest of it. He opened the crate carefully. Inside were stacks of documents, all organized in folders with neat labels: land deeds, water rights certificates, mineral surveys, property tax records going back decades, legal documents with official seals. My grandfather wasn't just a farmer, Mateo said, pulling out papers one by one. He was a strategist. He understood that this land had value beyond crops. He handed me a document. Original land deed, 200 acres, purchased in 1952 for $3,500. Another document. Water rights certificate, exclusive access to the aquifer that runs under this property. Do you know how valuable water rights are in agricultural country? Another. Mineral survey from 1968. Look at this. I scanned the faded text. Words jumped out at me. Lithium deposits, potential extraction, commercial viability. Lithium? I looked up at him. For batteries, electric cars, energy storage. My grandfather had this land surveyed when he heard about mineral deposits in the region. He found something, but the technology wasn't there yet to extract it economically. Now? Mateo smiled grimly. Now it's worth millions. He pulled out more papers. Property tax records showing the land has been in continuous family ownership. No liens, no mortgages. And this? He held up a thick legal document. This is the trust my grandfather established before he died. What kind of trust? A conservation trust. It legally protects this land from being sold or developed without the unanimous consent of all trustees. My grandfather saw what happened to other family farms. Kids inheriting land and immediately selling it to developers. He wanted to make sure this place would be protected. I felt dizzy. Who are the trustees? Originally, my grandfather, my father, and a representative from the County Conservation Board. When my grandfather passed, I took his place. When my father retired and moved to Arizona, he transferred his trustee role to me as well. So you're two of the three trustees? Not anymore. He pulled out one more document, recent. The ink still looked fresh. The day we got married, I added a fourth trustee position to the trust. And I appointed you. I stared at the paper. My name. Legal and official. Valentina Rodriguez, trustee. You're not just my wife, Mateo said quietly. You're a co-steward of this legacy, which means that when your parents asked you to just sell the farm, they were asking you to violate a legal trust that protects your own future. How much is it worth? I whispered. Mateo pulled out an appraisal document from last year. Land value, not including mineral rights or water access, $4.2 million. I couldn't breathe. Water rights in this region are worth approximately $800,000 separately. And the lithium deposits? He pulled out a geological survey from a company I'd never heard of. Estimated value over a 10-year extraction period, $15 to $20 million. The room tilted. But it doesn't matter, Mateo said, because we can't sell it even if we wanted to. The trust requires unanimous consent from all four trustees. Me, you, my father in Arizona, and the County Conservation Board representative. And the trust was specifically designed to prevent exactly what your family is asking. It cannot be used as collateral. It cannot be leveraged for personal debts. It exists to protect the land, period. I sank onto an old storage box. Why didn't you tell me? Would you have believed me? When we first met, when you were still living in your parents' shadow, comparing yourself to Gabriela, would you have believed that I was offering you this? He was right. I would have thought it was too good to be true. I needed you to choose me for who I am, Mateo continued, not for what I own. And I needed you to discover your own worth here, on this land, before you understood its financial value. Because the money doesn't matter, Val. The legacy does. I looked at the documents spread around us. Decades of careful planning, protection, foresight. We need to call someone, I said. Someone who can verify all this, because when we tell my family, they're not going to believe it. Mateo pulled out his phone. I already did. Lorena Herrera, the county land surveyor. She worked with my grandfather for 20 years. She's actually the Conservation Board's trustee representative. I called her on the drive back from your parents' house. She said she'd be willing to explain everything if needed. You knew they'd ask us to sell. I suspected. People get desperate, and desperate people forget who they're really asking. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Gabriela's face, about Mom's pleading voice, about Dad's gray complexion. They were scared, genuinely scared, but they'd also never asked what we were scared of, never wondered if we struggled, never checked if we needed help. They'd just assumed. A week passed. My phone exploded with messages. Mom calling twice a day, Dad leaving voicemails, Gabriela sending increasingly frantic texts. Have you thought about it? We're running out of time. Please, Val, I'm begging you. I can't believe you're doing this to me. Finally, Mom called with a different tone. We're having a family meeting, Sunday at 3 at the house. We need everyone there. Who's everyone? The whole family, your aunts and uncles, some cousins. We need to discuss this together. My stomach dropped. You're making this public. We need support, Mom said, her voice strained, and we need you to understand how serious this is. I hung up and told Mateo. They're going to pressure you, he said, in front of everyone, make you look like the bad guy if you say no. I know. Do you want me to call Lorena? Ask her to come? I thought about it. About Gabriela's sneering face 2 years ago. About the compass in my pocket. About the documents in the basement that told a story my family never bothered to learn. Yes, I said. Call her. It's time they knew the truth. Sunday arrived cold and gray. We drove to my parents' house in silence. The driveway was crowded with cars. Through the windows, I could see people gathering in the living room. Mateo reached over and squeezed my hand. You ready? No, but let's do it anyway. Mom met us at the door. Thank you for coming. Everyone's inside. The living room was packed. Aunt Josefina, Uncle Marco, cousins I hadn't seen in months, and in the center of it all, Gabriela and Ricardo, looking like defendants at their own trial. Mom cleared her throat. Thank you all for being here. As you know, Gabriela and Ricardo are facing serious financial challenges, legal issues that could destroy their lives if we don't help. Murmurs of sympathy rippled through the room. Valentina and Mateo have land, Dad continued. Substantial property that could be used to help. But they're hesitating. All eyes turned to us. I felt my face flush. Gabriela stood up. I know I wasn't always kind about Valentina's choices. I mocked her for marrying a farmer. I thought she was making a mistake. Her voice broke. But I never thought she'd abandon me when I needed her most. Aunt Josefina put a hand to her chest. Valentina, surely you can help. It's family. $200,000 isn't that much when you own all that land, Uncle Marco added. I opened my mouth, but Mateo stood first. Before we continue, he said calmly, I want everyone to understand what we're actually discussing here. He pulled out his laptop from his bag. May I? Dad looked confused but nodded. Mateo connected his laptop to the TV. A presentation appeared on the screen. This is the property in question, Mateo said. A map appeared showing our land. 200 acres, continuous family ownership since 1952. He clicked to the next slide. Current appraised value, $4.2 million. The room went silent. Next slide. Water rights certificate. Exclusive access to underground aquifer. Estimated separate value, $800,000. Gabriela's face had gone white. Next slide. Geological survey from 2023. Lithium deposits beneath the property. Estimated extraction value over 10 years. $15 to $20 million. Uncle Marco's jaw dropped. 20 million? Potential, Mateo said. But yes. He clicked again. Now, here's what you're asking us to do. You want us to either sell this property or leverage it for a $200,000 loan. Setting aside the fact that this is generational wealth and irreplaceable heritage, there's a bigger problem. The next slide showed a legal document. Conservation Trust, established 1989. This land is protected by a legal trust that prevents sale or leverage without unanimous consent of all trustees, designed specifically to protect against the kind of pressure we're experiencing right now. Mom's face crumbled. We didn't know. No, Mateo said quietly. You didn't ask. He clicked to the final slide. Current trustees, myself, my father in Arizona, the County Conservation Board representative, and, as of 2 years ago, when we married, Valentina. My name appeared on the screen. So when you asked her to just sell the farm, Mateo continued, you were asking her to violate a legal trust that she's bound by oath to protect, a trust that specifically exists to prevent family pressure from destroying generational wealth. And more importantly, you were asking her to sacrifice her own future inheritance. The room was completely silent. But that's not even the point, I said, finding my voice. The point is that you never asked if we needed help. You never checked if we were struggling. You just assumed that because we didn't have a penthouse and designer bags, our life had no value. Gabriela stared at me. You've been rich this whole time? No, I said firmly. We've been building something. There's a difference. The front door opened. A woman in her 60s walked in, carrying a briefcase. Sorry I'm late. Traffic was terrible. Who's this? Dad asked. Lorena Herrera, the woman said, extending her hand. County Land Surveyor and Conservation Board trustee. Mateo called and asked if I'd be willing to clarify some things. She set her briefcase on the coffee table and pulled out files. I've known the Rodriguez family for 40 years. Worked with Mateo's grandfather when he first established the trust. That man was a visionary. He knew this land would be worth millions someday. So he protected it with every legal tool available. She turned to my parents. The trust cannot be broken, cannot be leveraged, cannot be sold without unanimous consent of all trustees. And even if all 4 trustees agreed, which they won't, the conservation easements built into the trust would make it nearly impossible to liquidate quickly. But there must be something, Mom pleaded. There isn't, Lorena said gently. And honestly, there shouldn't be. This land has been protected for a reason. So that families in crisis don't make short-sighted decisions that destroy generational wealth? Ricardo stood up suddenly. This is insane. You're going to let me go to prison over land you can't even use? We use it every day, Mateo said. We farm it, steward it, build our future on it. Your future, Gabriela spat. What about my future? What about mine? I shot back. 2 years ago, you laughed in my face. You called my husband a lowly farmer. You mocked every choice I made. And now you want me to give up everything so you can have a second chance at the life you threw away? Tears streamed down her face. I'm your sister. You're also the person who made me feel worthless for choosing love over status, for choosing character over wealth. I pulled the compass from my pocket, the one Mateo had given me. This guided Mateo's grandfather to this land. It guided me to a man who valued me for who I am, not what I could provide. And today, it's pointing me toward a future I'm proud of. Aunt Josefina spoke up. Valentina, I think Gabriela needs to apologize to you. Mom turned to her sister. Josefina, this isn't the time. It absolutely is the time, Aunt Josefina said firmly. We all heard how she talked about Mateo, how she treated Valentina's marriage like a joke, and now she expects her sister to sacrifice everything? No, that's not how family works. Other voices joined in, quiet murmurs of agreement, uncomfortable shifting. Dad put his head in his hands. We were wrong. To judge you, Valentina, to judge Mateo. We were wrong. We just wanted you to be secure, Mom whispered. I am secure, I said quietly. Maybe not in the way you imagined, but I'm secure in ways Gabriela never will be, because I built this life on truth, not appearances. I turned to Gabriela. I love you, but I won't sacrifice my future to fix mistakes that weren't mine to make. I hope you rebuild. I hope you find your way, but not on our backs. Silence filled the room, heavy and thick. Finally, Ricardo stood. We should go. His voice was hollow, defeated. Gabriela followed him to the door. At the threshold, she turned back. "I'm sorry," she said, so quietly I almost missed it. "I'm sorry for everything I said. You were right, and I was wrong." Why, then they were gone. The family meeting dissolved. People left in awkward clusters, unsure what to say. Mom and Dad walked us to the door. "Can you forgive us?" Mom asked. "Eventually," I said, "but it's going to take time. You need to understand that you asked me to give up my home, my inheritance, my future, because you thought Gabriela's life was more valuable than mine." Dad nodded slowly. "We see that now." 6 months later, Gabriela and Ricardo moved to a modest apartment across town. The legal case settled. Ricardo faced fines and probation but avoided prison. They started over. Smaller. Humbler. Gabriela sent a text in February. "I'm sorry, you were right." I didn't respond immediately, but I saved the message. The farm thrived. We hosted a harvest festival in September, inviting the community to celebrate the land's legacy. Mom and Dad came. They were quiet, respectful, learning to see us differently. Gabriela didn't come, but she sent flowers with a card. "Thank you for showing me what real wealth looks like." One evening, as the sun set over the fields, Mateo and I sat on the porch. The compass rested on the table between us, next to the property deed that bore both our names. "They mocked me for marrying a farmer," I said quietly. "They didn't realize I married a man who inherited wisdom, not just wealth." Mateo smiled. "And I married a woman strong enough to protect it." In the distance, the fields stretched golden in the dying light. 200 acres of legacy, of truth, of futures built on solid ground. And I finally understood what my family never had. The best inheritance isn't money. It's knowing who you are and refusing to compromise that truth for anyone, even family, especially family.